Marvel. Plundering the Multiverse, starting with the horse charm. Chapter 1. Inside the gloomy room, a weak light flickered from the incandescent lamp, alternating between bright and dim. Creak. Before the sound of the iron door being pushed open had faded, the friction sound of metal wheels rolling across the floor immediately followed. Two burly men wearing guard uniforms quickly walked in, pushing a hospital bed. Lying on the hospital bed was a young man with Asian features. At this moment, he was tightly restrained from head to toe, even turning his head was a luxury. Just one last time. I hope I can make it through. Su Ling prayed to himself internally, while also sniffing twice. Although he had been here many times, the mixed smell of disinfectant and metal in the air still made him feel very uncomfortable. The next second, a current flashed across Su Ling's pupils. In front of him, a virtual frame buzzed and expanded. Task name. Become the man who laughs at the god of death. Task content. Complete 10 near-death challenges 9/10. Task reward. Plunder. Point 1. That's right. Su Ling is a transmigrator. Originally, he was just a fragile college student from Dragon Country on the Blue Star. Just because he went downstairs to buy some pork knuckle rice, he had an intimate encounter with a dump truck that appeared out of nowhere. By the time his consciousness recovered, he was already in this unfamiliar world. Good news. Like many transmigrators, Su Ling has a cheat, named 10,000 Worlds Plunder. The cheat's function is as simple as its name. As long as he completes the tasks issued by the system and obtains plunder points, he can plunder abilities from all the myriad worlds. Bad news. There is no beginner's gift package, and he must complete the task in the frame before his cheat can be used. Worse news. This is the Marvel Universe. Why was I caught and experimented on right at the start? Just as the chaotic thoughts in Su Ling's mind were settling, a playful male voice reached his ear. We meet again, little white mouse from Asia. The cart stopped abruptly. The two burly men exchanged glances, said nothing more, and quickly turned to leave. After a moment of silence, a figure wearing a white lab coat and sporting a crew cut stepped out of the shadows. The main villain from the movie Deadpool 1, Ajax. Or rather, he should be called Francis. Light poured down from above his head, illuminating his sharply defined face in cold white. Francis glanced at the data on the instrument beside him, and then slowly said. After so many experiments, your body hasn't sustained any significant damage. It seems my intuition was right. You, this sudden appearance of a fellow, are indeed the best host. Listening to Francis's words, Su Ling remained silent. Due to the arrangement of great fortune, from Francis's perspective, Su Ling seemed to have appeared out of thin air, forcibly stuffed into the blind spot of the research institute's surveillance. Francis was naturally extremely interested in an experimental subject whose file information didn't even exist. And the way he expressed his interest was through even crueler experiments. After several rounds of brutal torture, Francis finally noticed that something was off about Su Ling. This seemingly ordinary young man, no matter how he was tortured, managed to survive with a terrifying willpower. Out of curiosity, he personally injected Su Ling with the mutant gene. Perhaps it was the buff bonus from transmigrating, or perhaps the gene serum created some abnormal resonance with Su Ling's body. Since then, Su Ling had survived every struggle on the brink of death. This also, by a strange coincidence, caused the system progress inside him to advance rapidly. Yet, the pain did not disappear because of adaptation. With every experiment, he could clearly feel his body being torn apart. But Su Ling never truly broke down. Because he knew too well. This laboratory would be destroyed sooner or later. And if he remained here, he would eventually turn to dust along with these metal scraps and instruments. Therefore, he wanted to leave, and he had to leave. Seeing that Su Ling had no intention of responding, Francis wasn't annoyed. Instead, he took off his white lab coat and said, before this, I always had one question. Where are you from? Are you from Dragon Country? If your answer satisfies me, I can make today a little less painful for you. Watching the smiling Francis sit down on the long bench, Su Ling was utterly bewildered. Seriously. Did torturing me create feelings, huh? Who the hell wants to chat with trash like you fool? No, the experiment must be done. I must get that plunder point. Thinking this, Su Ling immediately spoke. Don't ask me where I come from, my homeland is far away. Francis tilted his head. For some reason, he heard a sense of melody in Su Ling's words. After pondering the sentence again and realizing there was no useful information, Francis spoke. Where is, far away? It's right there. There. That's right, it's right there. The expression on Francis's face instantly froze. After a moment of silence, he finally realized that this young man from Asia was making fun of him. The humiliation of being mocked made the smile in Francis's eyes completely vanish. Very well. He stood up and reached out to dab a bit of unknown liquid from a nearby metal tray. He then smeared all of it onto Su Ling's temples. Immediately afterward, Francis skillfully placed all the messy metal needles in position. It looks like this guy has tortured people this way many times. Catching the flash of fear in Su Ling's eyes, Francis sneered. You're scared, aren't you? For the next hour, your body will be continuously electrocuted, but don't worry, I won't let you die. I hope you can maintain that sense of humor while being electrocuted. As his voice fell, the instrument behind Francis was activated. The next second, electricity penetrated his skin, burning his nerves. Su Ling's body began to twitch uncontrollably, and the restraints on his wrists made a crack crack sound. Amidst the intense pain, the familiar mechanical voice sounded in his ear. Lethal stimulation detected. System trigger conditions met. Task completed. Plunder point, +1. Then, everything returned to darkness. Su Ling didn't know how long he had been unconscious. He only felt like his consciousness was a machine with its network cable unplugged. It wasn't until a certain moment, when a low buzzing sound echoed, that he was pulled back from the darkness. After opening his eyes, the blinding white light made it difficult for Su Ling to adjust immediately. Once his vision gradually cleared, he saw that he was no longer in the cold operating room, but in a spacious hall. Rows of cold white lights hung suspended in the air, illuminating the entire space with a stark, pale glow. The hall was filled with hospital beds. A person lay on every single bed. They wore uniform white patient gowns. Although their limbs weren't restrained, their expressions were extremely rigid. Several others simply had their heads tilted, looking from afar like cooled corpses. But regardless of their posture, the same expression was written on all their faces: despair. That hollow look of having all hope completely stripped away made the air feel oppressive. Nima. Su Ling let out a muffled groan and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He could feel that he was still alive. Francis, you better wait for me. Just as Francis had said, he truly hadn't died. But the bone-deep pain was simply beyond description. As a transmigrator, Su Ling knew exactly what this place was. This research institute, which outwardly flew the banner of curing diseases, was secretly a complete slaughterhouse. They used curing cancer and eliminating genetic defects as bait, attracting batches of desperate patients to willingly deliver themselves. But everyone brought here eventually became an experimental subject. They were injected with various unknown chemicals and tortured repeatedly until they were barely recognizable as human. And the injection Francis gave him earlier was a special serum. It required adrenaline secreted by the human body under extreme pain as a catalyst to stimulate the dormant mutant genes deep within the DNA. Once these types of genes were awakened, they would grant people strength far exceeding that of ordinary humans. This was what was known as a mutant. However, even the experimental subjects whose genes successfully mutated did not gain freedom. They would be forcibly fitted with restraint collars, their consciousness controlled, turning them into obedient mutant slaves to be packaged and auctioned off by the research institute. In a sense, this place wasn't a laboratory, but a factory producing superpowered slaves. Never mind all that, I need to check if the mission is complete first. Although Su Ling had faintly heard a mechanical voice before being electrocuted, he still needed to check to feel reassured. As his thoughts shifted slightly, a translucent light frame appeared, suspended in front of his vision. This time, the display was different. Instead of the cold mission prompt, there was only one conspicuous message flashing in the center of the interface. Do you wish to use plunder points? Yes, no. It really is complete. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Su Ling chose the yes option without the slightest hesitation. Ding! Plunder points have been used. 10,000 worlds target analysis in progress. After the voice faded, the world fell into an eerie silence. Su Ling held his breath and waited quietly. But this, quiet, was harder to bear than any torture. Every minute and every second felt infinitely stretched out to Su Ling. He tried hard to calm himself, but the pain in his body, the days of torture he had endured, and the uncertainty of the wait made Su Ling nearly frantic. What made him want to curse the most was that this broken system didn't even provide a progress bar. Not even a loading prompt. Are you actually working? You haven't crashed, have you? Time flowed by, minute by minute. Just as he was about to be driven mad by the long wait, the virtual interface finally trembled slightly. A new line of large text appeared on the light screen. Plunder successful. Plunder source world. Jackie Chan Adventures world. Plunder target. 12 talismans, horse talisman. The next second. In Su Ling's sea of consciousness, a dazzling white light flashed. The blinding light split the originally chaotic spiritual world in half. As the light spread, an ancient-looking talisman slowly materialized. It was a talisman seal, with a proud, rearing steed carved in the center, and its surface flowed with a light that was both gentle and powerful. Wait! Jackie Chan Adventures. Horse talisman. Su Ling felt like his brain had completely crashed. But before that thought even settled, a strange sensation swept over his entire body. It wasn't pain, but a feeling of complete recovery. Su Ling's heart gave a fierce thump. Immediately afterward, a surge of warm power flowed out from the horse talisman, spreading along his blood vessels throughout his body. His cold body trembled, his numb nerves were reawakened, and even the burning pain in his temples quickly faded. An invisible power was rebuilding his physical body. The power of the horse talisman, it's working. Su Ling muttered softly in his heart. Yet, at the same time, a trace of doubt surfaced in his mind. The anime Jackie Chan Adventures was a well-known classic on the blue star he came from, and Su Ling had naturally watched it countless times. The power of the horse talisman represented healing and regeneration, symbolizing perfection. But according to his memory, the user had to hold the talisman itself for the power to remain effective. But now, the talisman was clearly still suspended in his sea of consciousness, he hadn't even taken it out, yet he still received the complete healing effect. So, this is the enhanced version. Meanwhile, in a parallel timeline, the Jackie Chan Adventures world. Above the vast white snowfield, fierce winds whipped up flying snow. Inside the ancient stone temple, Jackie Chan looked at the horse talisman in his hand and let out a long breath. Found another one. Captain Black should be very happy now. Jade, standing behind him, glanced at the statue that had just been repaired by the talisman. The originally shattered stone statue was now restored to its former state, with even the tiniest cracks having vanished. She blinked twice, her eyes filled with curiosity and shock. The horse talisman actually has this kind of ability, I wonder. Before she could finish speaking, a sudden change occurred. Buzz. A dazzling white light erupted from the horse talisman, causing the entire stone temple to shake. Uncle Chan. What happened? Jade cried out in surprise, subconsciously raising her hand to shield her eyes. Jackie Chan was also blinded by the glare, and within a few seconds, the white light swallowed the surroundings. This strange light came and went quickly, and the surroundings soon returned to calm. Jackie Chan and Jade exchanged glances, both seeing astonishment in the other's eyes. Could it be the Dark Hand? That's really strange. If Old Man was here, it would be great. Jackie Chan mumbled a few words, about to tell Jade to be careful, but suddenly froze on the spot. Because he suddenly realized that the horse talisman, which had just been resting in his palm and emitting a gentle glow, had completely vanished. The horse talisman, where did it go? Su Ling didn't know that in a distant parallel universe, Jackie Chan and Xiao Yu were standing petrified in a stone temple. At this moment, he was focusing all his attention on the virtual box in front of him. 10,000 Worlds Plunder System. Host. Su Ling. Strength. 21. Durability. 50. Agility. 21. Current abilities. Horse Talisman. The horse talisman's healing magic is deeply bound to the host's soul, purifying all abnormal conditions caused by external forces within the body and repairing all lesions and injuries. Note: the noble horse will make you fearless of all harm, but only if you don't turn into powder. Plunder points. 1 to 0. Looking at the content before him, Su Ling gradually calmed down. Strictly speaking, the horse talisman only made his physical body almost immortal. As long as he didn't turn into a meat pie, this healing power would forcibly pull him back from the brink of death. It still doesn't feel like enough. This is the Marvel Universe. Su Ling shook his head. During his days at the Research Institute, he had witnessed too much life and death, and his personality had long become cautious. Better safe than sorry. This saying had been deeply etched into Su Ling's heart. Just then, a blurry image suddenly flashed through the depths of his mind. Shendu. This major villain from Jackie Chan Adventures who ran through the entire story. When Shendu obtained the power of the 12 talismans, his declaration, "I lack nothing," truly resonated with people. That was a true, divine form. Similarly, a thought quietly emerged in Su Ling's mind. What if he could also fuse all 12 talismans? Just imagining it made his blood boil. Immortality, speed, invisibility, breath, what a terrifying existence that would be. My injuries are healed. If I'm taken back to the lab, I'll be exposed immediately. After all, the horse talisman isn't offensive, I have to find a way to leave. The 10,000 Worlds Plunder system was completely different from the novel Su Ling had read on Longxing. It wouldn't communicate with the host, nor would it give prompt sounds to guide his next actions, yet it had a task module. This mission is complete, but the next one hasn't appeared yet. Su Ling frowned, his thoughts racing. That means new missions don't trigger automatically, they require certain specific conditions to be met. Although this was just his conjecture, Su Ling's intuition had always been accurate. He never doubted himself when it came to life or death judgments. Moreover, leaving this place was no longer just an impulse to escape, it was a deeper obsession. He wanted to control his destiny, to unlock more powerful abilities, but all of this had one prerequisite. To escape this living hell. With a thought, the translucent virtual box in front of him faded. After a simple stretch, Su Ling found that he had completely recovered. The horse talisman was like a mobile blood pool, repairing his body every second. Propping himself up with his hands, Su Ling sat up and began to ponder the possibility of escape. The frequency of patrols outside the door, blind spots in surveillance, the width of ventilation ducts, Francis's direction. Before these thoughts could fully form, a hoarse voice came from the adjacent bed. "You're up so fast." Su Ling's brow twitched, and he looked in the direction of the voice. The speaker was a white young man with a thick beard. He leaned against the metal frame of the bed, his face pale. On his gaunt face, his cheekbones protruded sharply, and his eye sockets were deeply sunken. He looked as if all life had been drained from him. The white young man tried to shake his head, a small movement that still made him wince in pain. "Your getting up disturbed my date with Vanessa. I was just one step away from getting in." "Shut up, Wade." Su Ling rolled his eyes. "Instead of dreaming here, why don't you think about how to get out? You don't want Vanessa to be hugging other men, do you? You fool." A provoked Wade was somewhat exasperated. "Vanessa is mine, no one can take her away. When I get rid of those cancer cells, I'll hold Vanessa in front of you and show you what the most beautiful woman and the most handsome man in the world look like." Su Ling shrugged, no longer arguing with him. This man named Wade, his full name was Wade Winston Wilson. He was the famous Deadpool, Marvel's top motormouth and little rascal. Due to cancer cells detected in his body, a desperate Wade voluntarily joined this genetic modification experiment as a volunteer. It was precisely because of this experiment that he and Su Ling, who had just transmigrated to this world, met by chance. Perhaps because Su Ling's tough attribute piqued his interest, Wade paid special attention to this taciturn Asian youth. Of course, Su Ling also actively approached him. After all, in a hellish place like this, anyone who could talk was an extremely precious existence. Soon, the two became fellow sufferers in this research institute, or as Wade himself put it, good buddies. Despite Wade's sloppy demeanor and constant chatter, as a top mercenary, his combat power and psychological resilience were astonishingly strong. Su Ling, a transmigrator, was tormented to the brink of mental collapse just to complete his mission. But Wade, this guy, relied entirely on his own will to endure. According to the movie plot in his memory, after Wade acquired the healing factor, a violent explosion would occur within the research institute, followed by a fire. At that time, this would become the most dangerous area in the entire research institute. Everyone would face the threat of death. In his mind, the entire plot flashed by like a fast-forwarded film. The next moment, a bold idea suddenly exploded in Su Ling's mind. What if that explosion happened earlier? The power of the horse talisman gave him the ability to heal himself. But the premise was not to be instantly blown to smithereens. Fire, chaos, alarms, these words intertwined in his mind, forming a web of life and death struggle. That's right. Su Ling muttered to himself, the corners of his mouth turning up. Since it's destined to explode, might as well make it explode sooner. Wade, beside him, was half leaning on the hospital bed. He caught a glimpse of Su Ling's subtle smile and then said, "Oh no, I've seen that expression before. That's the, I just came up with a ridiculously crazy idea, expression. Brother, you're not planning to commit suicide by eating a monitor, are you? That thing has no nutritional value." Su Ling ignored his chatter, instead turning his head and looking at Wade with sudden seriousness. "Wade, I need to tell you something." As the words fell, the air in the hall seemed to solidify. Wade froze for 2 seconds, seemingly unaccustomed to the guy suddenly changing the topic. His expression paused slightly, and he subconsciously wanted to crack a joke to lighten the mood. Huh. Don't tell me you want to confess your love. But just as the words reached his lips, Wade clearly saw Su Ling's face under the faint light. It wasn't fear, despair, or madness, it was an expression of absolute calm. Wade's verbal barrage was instantly stifled. He swallowed, nodded after a few seconds of silence. "You're being frighteningly serious. Tell me. I'll listen carefully." Su Ling didn't beat around the bush, he spoke directly. "I saw Vanessa's name on Ajax's equipment." Upon hearing this, Wade looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His body, which had been leaning against the headboard and was so weak he seemed about to die, suddenly shot up straight. Pain, torment, wounds, all of these were instantly thrown out the window. His 2 bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at Su Ling. "Wade, you came here voluntarily." Su Ling paused slightly and continued. "But don't forget, many others were brought in against their will." He leaned back casually against the headboard. This contrasted sharply with the straight-backed, tense Wade. "Of course, it's possible I misread the name. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. After all, there's more than one person named Vanessa in this country." The surroundings fell silent once more. Wade's gaze, which had been on the verge of losing control, suddenly retracted, and he calmed down slightly. He stared ahead, his mind beginning to race. Coming here for cancer treatment was his own decision, Vanessa didn't know about it. But, this wretched place is dark and sunless. How long has he been locked up here? 3 days? A week? Or longer? Only God knows if Vanessa has noticed anything unusual. If she really did discover something, would Vanessa search for him, get noticed, and even, get dragged in? The more he thought, the heavier Wade's heart became. A ball of fire seemed lodged in his chest, making it hard to breathe. Su Ling was personally singled out and taken away for torture by that fool Ajax every day. Wade didn't doubt for a second that Su Ling could see and remember things. What's more, Su Ling was his good brother. How could a good brother lie to him? Bang! Wade slammed the bed and sprang up from the hospital bed. The sudden movement caused a tearing pain in his chest, but he seemed completely oblivious to it. Wade gritted his teeth, his face grim. Ignoring the pain and the fact that his body should have been too weak to stand, he rushed step by step towards the main entrance of the hall. "I'm going to see for myself." Wade's voice echoed throughout the entire hall. "What the hell have you trash recorded? If you dare touch a single hair on Vanessa's head, I'll flay every last one of you." The guards and the numb-faced experimental subjects alike were stunned by Wade's sudden outburst. Many experimental subjects instinctively shrank their necks. Su Ling lay on the hospital bed, watching Wade quickly disappear from his sight. A slight curve unconsciously lifted the corner of his mouth. A good brother is meant to be sold. Time inside the research institute seemed extraordinarily long. Su Ling curled up in the corner. Though motionless, he was more alert than ever. The explosion would sweep through the entire hall, but keeping some distance was always beneficial. It should be soon. In this enclosed and pitch-black environment, the concept of time simply didn't exist. There was no sunlight, no external sounds, only the burgeoning aura of death silently fermenting in the air. Su Ling had no idea how much time had passed. 10 minutes. Half an hour. Several hours. He couldn't even tell if the beeping sounds of the instruments were starting to repeat the same rhythm. But Su Ling showed no slackness whatsoever. Because the slightest movement, or even a 1-second misjudgment, could cause him to miss the only opportunity to escape. After Wade roared and left, Su Ling maintained complete vigilance, waiting for the disaster that was destined to arrive. Finally. Boom. A deafening explosion erupted from the depths of the hall. The entire hall seemed to be violently lifted and then smashed back down by a giant. Before anyone could react. Immediately following, a scorching surge of heat, hot enough to instantly blister skin, swept across the entire hall. What? What happened? Fire. It's fire. Fire is coming out of there. Su Ling only saw a blinding flash of fire before his eyes. And then, crash. A tremendous force violently flung him, along with several distant hospital beds, into the air. The metal bed frames spun in the air, instantly shattering into several pieces before they even hit the ground. Driven by the inertia of the massive force, Su Ling completely lost control of his body and was flung out like a ragdoll, crashing into a far corner of the hall. Thud. The fierce impact felt like being struck by a giant hammer on his back. He only managed to stop after hitting the wall, leaving fine cracks in it. Flames roared out from the center, filling the entire hall with a foul odor. Clearly, everything happened too fast. Some people had already been reduced to black ash. Su Ling was covered in wounds. His exposed skin was charred black, with bone visible in many places. His hospital gown was stuck to his skin, like a layer of fire-baked film. He had countless broken ribs, arms, and leg bones. For a normal person, these injuries would have meant instant death, or at least being on the verge of dying. But Su Ling was not. He propped himself against the wall and stood up just like that. If one looked closely, they would see Su Ling's charred skin rapidly peeling away, like old tree bark being stripped off, revealing the quickly regenerating flesh beneath. The bleeding stopped, and the ruptured tendons and bones automatically fused. Even the broken bones inside his body emitted faint, click-clack, sounds as they restructured. In just a few breaths, the formerly fatal injuries vanished completely, without leaving a single scar. Reflected in the firelight, Su Ling raised his head, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. The plan succeeded. He dared not waste any more time. Su Ling took a step and quickly ran toward the distance. His escape plan was simple. Use the advantage of being a transmigrator to accelerate the plot that was supposed to happen. In the original work, after Wade was tortured by Ajax, he gained the healing factor, which subsequently triggered the Research Institute's explosion. This was the most chaotic and perfect escape opportunity Su Ling needed. The explosion came suddenly but lasted only a short time. After the explosion, the hall was a mess, with scattered debris and fragments on the ground. Several experimental subjects were blown into almost charred skeletons, frozen in their painful death throes. Some who were lucky enough to still be alive were firmly bound to their hospital beds, unable to escape, struggling and screaming desperately in the flames. But Su Ling merely glanced at them, then casually grabbed a relatively intact piece of clothing and rushed away without hesitation. He wasn't a savior, nor did he have the inclination to be one. He just wanted to leave this living hell. The Research Institute was already dark, and the brief flash of fire from the explosion was fleeting. A moment later, the entire hall plunged back into darkness and chaos. Su Ling hurried forward, relying on his memory, shielding his arm from the incoming smoke, pushing his way towards his destination step by step. He could feel the surrounding temperature rising at an alarming rate, and scorching heat waves constantly slapped against his skin. Even worse. He was barefoot now. The ground was covered in metal sheets, glowing red from the explosion's heat. Every step Su Ling took felt like treading on scorching coals. The flesh on the soles of his feet was instantly charred, then instantly regenerated. This pain was enough to drive an ordinary person insane on the spot. If it weren't for the horse talisman operating frantically to keep Su Ling in his most perfect state. He probably wouldn't last 2 minutes in this fiery purgatory. Just then, a blurry figure suddenly entered Su Ling's line of sight. Under the flickering firelight, the figure stumbled and struggled forward, hugging the wall. Grayish smoke and dust had stained the person's attire, but Su Ling recognized the outfit at a glance. It was a research institute guard. And one who hadn't completely died yet. The guard's right arm was already a bloody mess, and pain made his whole body tremble. Yet, in his left hand, he still clutched a dust-covered gun. The guard's gaze met Su Ling's. The tattered patient gown, the charred yet rapidly healing skin, that eerie aura of being directly engulfed by an explosion yet still able to stand. At this, the guard was completely stunned. What in the world is going on? He subconsciously glanced at the fragments of the patient gown on Su Ling. Those were the Research Institute's specialized experimental subject uniforms. Almost instantly, the shock in the guard's eyes was quickly replaced by vigilance, fear, and even a forced murderous intent. He raised his gun, pointed it at Su Ling, and shouted, "Mutant, die!" But Su Ling had moved the instant the guard raised his gun. He bent down and snatched a broken wooden stick from the ground, a splintered piece of a hospital bed from the explosion. No thought, no hesitation, purely an eruption of survival instinct. Su Ling lunged forward. The distance was too close for the gun to fully aim. PFF'd. The wooden stick brutally pierced the side of the guard's abdomen, and the guard's face instantly contorted. He tilted his head back and flew backward. Ah! His body hit the wall, then slid to the ground. The gun fell to the ground, rolling a few times in the firelight. The guard tried to raise his hand but had completely lost the ability to fight back. Su Ling didn't stop. This was hell, not a school playground. Bang bang bang. While the guard was on the ground, completely unable to resist. Su Ling raised his foot and stomped hard on his head. The guard's head was knocked to the side, but Su Ling gave him no chance to breathe. A second kick, a third kick. Faced with Su Ling's brutal assault, the guard's struggles grew weaker and weaker, until only instinctive twitches remained. Then, he completely stopped moving. Just in case, Su Ling thrust the almost shattered wooden stick in his hand once more. Phew, he should be thoroughly dead now. Looking down at the bloody corpse before him, Su Ling's throat bobbed, and a churning sensation rose in his stomach. That was a normal person's physiological reaction. But it was limited to physiological discomfort. Su Ling would never feel any so-called pity or sympathy for these people from the Research Institute. How many experimental subjects had these guys tortured? How many innocent patients had they killed? How many people, like livestock, were dragged into operating rooms and vanished forever? Such people wouldn't be wronged even if they died 100 times. Perhaps among these guards, there were a few who were coerced. But what did that have to do with Su Ling? When he was dragged onto the operating table and tortured to the point of wishing for death, he never saw any. So, what does it matter to me? Su Ling squatted down, quickly fumbling at the guard's belt. Soon, he found several spare magazines and scattered bullets. Not bad, he murmured, stuffing the bullets into his pocket. Then he glanced over and saw the handgun that had fallen during the struggle lying on the ground not far away. Su Ling walked over, bent down, and picked it up. The cold metal touched his palm, and he lightly weighed it a few times. This was his first time touching a real gun. After all, he had no superpowers, and in this environment, even a piece of iron could give a sense of security. Clatter. A crisp sound suddenly came from his ear. Su Ling instinctively looked up. The ceiling of the room was glowing red from the flames, and pieces of rubble began to fall continuously. The fire was getting out of control. Su Ling's heart tightened. He knew very well that if he stayed any longer, he might be buried directly in the ruins, unable to move. The horse talisman could continuously repair his injuries, but it couldn't help him crawl out from under dozens of tons of reinforced concrete. Which way is this? The entanglement with the guard had completely disrupted Su Ling's planned route. He was about to continue observing his surroundings, but in the distance, a denser smoke rolled in, instantly turning his vision pitch black. This isn't good. Su Ling steeled his heart and tucked the handgun into his waistband. Since he couldn't see the direction, he wouldn't think about it. Forget it. With a low roar, Su Ling simply gave up thinking and sprinted wildly in a certain direction. Meanwhile, in the area where the explosion occurred, the air was filled with the smell of char, rot, and burnt plastic. Francis, accompanied by over 10 guards holding fire extinguishers, sprayed dry powder everywhere, attempting to suppress the wildly spreading fire. Hurry! Put down the fire on both sides first. The ceiling over there is about to collapse. Watch out! Why is the fire getting bigger the more we spray? Amidst the guards' shouts, Francis paced back and forth, grimly surveying the research institute half swallowed by the sea of fire. Shattered metal, collapsed hospital beds, charred corpses, all these sights gave him a vague, ominous premonition. It was just abusing an experimental subject who insulted him, so why did it cause such a massive disturbance? Before he had walked a few steps, Francis's gaze stopped at a corner not far away. The oxygen chamber leaned crookedly against the wall, but it was empty. The person is gone. Suddenly, a muffled sound. A blurry figure suddenly rushed out of the thick smoke, lunging toward a guard standing at the very edge of the group. That person was holding shards of glass in their hand. The next second, PFF'd. The broken glass sliced across the guard's throat. Blood spurted out, forming an eerie red arc under the firelight. The guard widened his eyes in shock, clutched his throat with both hands, and then collapsed to his knees with a thud. And that figure finally revealed itself from the firelight and thick smoke. It was the missing Wade. At this moment, his chest was heaving violently, and fierce hatred burned in his eyes. He raised his head and roared at the top of his lungs. Francis. Just as Su Ling had anticipated. After Francis took Wade away, the torture was initially just routine. But because of Vanessa, Wade launched into a series of creative insults against Francis, the kind without profanity. Coupled with Su Ling's previous mockery of him, Francis was completely enraged. Therefore, Francis chose to lock Wade in the sealed, oxygen-regulating apparatus and even told him his real name. It gave off a strong sense of déjà vu, like a villain dying because they talked too much. It must be known that since the research institute was established, no one had ever walked out of that apparatus alive. What did it matter if a dying person knew his name? The apparatus used to lock up Wade was an experimental device capable of precisely controlling air composition. It was originally intended to test the activity of mutant genes under extreme conditions. But in Francis's hands, it became a tool for torturing experimental subjects. He lowered the oxygen concentration, making Wade wildly struggle between suffocation and fainting. However, Francis's mistake was that such dedicated torture actually accelerated Wade's transformation and personally created an immortal monster. But Wade wasn't Su Ling after all. He didn't have a system, nor did he have the horse talisman. Therefore, Wade, who gained the self-healing factor, also paid a heavy price. It could be said that at this moment, he no longer resembled a human. At least, not in appearance. His exposed skin was almost entirely ulcerated, looking as if it had been soaked in sulfuric acid. What was more terrifying was his face. It was unrecognizable from its original appearance. Every inch of his skin was covered in cracks, making him look exactly like a monster that had just crawled out of hell. Even Wade himself froze for 10 full seconds upon seeing it. Fear, despair, anger, all sorts of emotions were pressed together, completely overwhelming Wade's sanity, leading him to decide to blow up the entire research institute. Upon seeing Wade's twisted, rotting, yet still living appearance, Francis finally understood the source of this inexplicable explosion. An experimental subject riot, huh? Francis sneered. I've seen this situation too many times. He extended his right hand and pointed forward. Shoot. Kill him. After a brief moment of shock, the guards also raised their weapons. Bang 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 bang. Muzzle flashes sprayed wildly, and bullets poured out from over a dozen guns like a storm. Facing this overwhelming firepower, Wade quickly rolled and hid behind a collapsed metal plate. He still didn't understand what had happened to his body, but relying on his mercenary instincts, he held a gun in one hand and fired single shots at the surrounding guards. Francis, standing behind the guards, watched his subordinates continuously suppress Wade with firepower. In his opinion, taking down Wade was only a matter of time. A dozen armed guards surrounding one experimental subject, the battle wouldn't last long. In that instant just now, he clearly saw Wade's skin regenerating. This meant a new toy had appeared. Very good. Once I recapture you, I will take you apart and study you thoroughly. Before his words even landed, a sound of rushing air suddenly rang out ahead. Swoosh. From the thick smoke a few meters away, a bullet, traveling at an extremely tricky angle, shot straight toward the center of Francis's brow. Francis's pupils suddenly contracted. The next second, his body suddenly tilted to the right, striking a strange pose amidst the firelight. The bullet grazed his nose, eventually hitting a steel plate far behind him, sparking. Francis regained his footing, but his expression turned gloomy again. Which idiot lacks judgment and is shooting over here? Before the surrounding guards could explain, a burst of loud laughter suddenly came from deep within the thick smoke. Ha 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 ha. My good brother. Wade shouted while reloading his gun. I knew you would come looking for me. He poked half his head out, his eyes fierce yet excited like a rabid dog. Come on. Let's kill this fool together. The air seemed to fall silent for half a second. Francis. What does that mean? His eyebrow twitched wildly. There's another one. Francis's heart sank, and he quickly turned his head to look around. But the firelight and thick smoke intertwined, making his vision extremely chaotic. And in a patch of shadow further away, Su Ling, who was leaning against a collapsed metal pillar and half crouching in the darkness, froze completely when he heard Wade say that directly. The question marks on his face were no fewer than Francis's. You fooling sold me out. You fool, Wade. Su Ling roared internally. As expected of a mercenary. Is it okay that you spotted me the moment I arrived? He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his heart filled with helplessness. Just now, he had sprinted all the way out from the depths of the rapidly collapsing research institute. Perhaps it was fate ordained by heaven. Su Ling twisted and turned, finally managing to crawl out from a collapsed corner of the wall, believing he had finally escaped. But the moment he poked his head out, he saw a scene of intense crossfire right in front of him. Su Ling originally wanted to sneak to the side, preferably lying low quietly and waiting for them to finish fighting before slipping away. But fate played a trick on him again. Because at the end of that narrow passage, Francis, that stone-faced fool, was standing right there. In other words, the only viable route was completely blocked by this son of a fool. He knew Francis was also a mutant, whose physical quality far exceeded ordinary people, and who had cut off all his pain nerves. But Su Ling still instinctively tried, firing a shot from the pistol in his hand toward that guy. But now, the ambush had failed, and instead, he was discovered by Wade first. Su Ling was completely numb. This Marvel universe is truly ridiculously boundless. Soon, Su Ling calmed down. Suppressing the 10,000 thoughts of wanting to run away, in his heart, his mind raced. Francis is indeed a mutant. But his ability isn't elemental manipulation or psychic blasts, which are mass destruction type superpowers. This means he can't instantly kill across distances in a chaotic situation. Not to mention the smoke swirling around and the confused visibility. If he wants to charge in precisely, he'd first have to get through the security guards who are in a melee. So, at least for a short while, he was safe. Calm, calm. Su Ling silently repeated in his heart. First, think about how to break this situation. Before that thought could fully settle. Whoosh. The air was suddenly compressed by some high-speed passing force. The next second, a fist magnified infinitely before his eyes. What the hell? Su Ling didn't even have time to react, he could only instinctively raise his arms and hastily cross them in front of him. Bang! The moment the fist struck his arms, he felt as if both his arms had been hit head-on by a high-speed train. Su Ling could even hear the cracking sound of his bones under the immense force. Clearly, this force was something he couldn't withstand. Boom! His entire body was sent reeling back 5 or 6 steps by the punch, stepping on scorching metal fragments, but Su Ling completely ignored the pain. After retreating several meters, his steps finally stabilized beside a collapsed metal plate. At the same time, Francis, who emerged from the shadows, narrowed his eyes and scrutinized Su Ling from head to toe. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. In Francis's eyes, the recovery ability Wade had just displayed was important experimental material, a research subject toy with immense potential. But this Asian teenager in front of him, from the first day he was dragged into the laboratory, the stubbornness, resistance, and even the unyielding spirit in his bones made Francis extremely displeased. Originally, his plan was to personally torment Su Ling to death by the next morning, then dispose of him as a discarded failure. Who knew that a sudden explosion would completely disrupt his carefully arranged rhythm? But now, a smirk slowly curved on Francis's lips. It's not too late. As soon as he finished speaking, swish! Francis's figure completely vanished from where he stood. He lunged at Su Ling like a ghost. The speed was so fast that his trajectory was almost invisible. Su Ling's heart suddenly went cold. Not good. The horse talisman circulated wildly within his body, repairing the damage caused by that punch at an indescribable speed. But the problem was, at such a close distance and such high speed. Even if he had recovery abilities, taking a direct hit wasn't a joke. Da 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 da. A sudden burst of machine gun fire tore through the thick smoke from a distance. Tracers dragged streaks of fire, closing in on the rapidly moving Francis. Hey! The tattered, completely disfigured, charred figure roared towards them. Francis! You fool! Stay away from my brother! With that, Wade suddenly raised his machine gun and unleashed another volley of bullets. Francis is indeed a mutant. But he's not an immortal monster like Wade, who can bounce back even when burned to a crisp. He doesn't have instant healing abilities. Once bullets fly around in his body, even if he doesn't feel pain, his physical functions will still be damaged, and his mobility will be affected. Not to mention the chaos in the research institute now, who knows if there are other troublemakers like Su Ling and Wade. Once injured, the situation could easily spiral out of his control. Francis, he is someone who dislikes variables. So, the moment the bullet storm appeared, he quickly made a judgment. The next moment, swish! Francis's figure suddenly dodged to the side, his toes barely touching the ground as he rapidly retreated. Bullets rained down on the spot where he had just stood, even making sparks fly from the ground. Francis, having dodged the barrage, landed behind a collapsed piece of metal. He scanned the area, and his face instantly darkened. The dozen or so fully armed guards he had brought were all lying on the ground. Clearly, Wade had done all of this alone. Useless. Francis cursed angrily, just as he suppressed the rage in his chest and prepared to re-evaluate the situation. From behind the collapsed metal, reddened by the flames in the distance, Wade's roar suddenly came. Get out here! Francis! Before his voice fully landed, a grotesque figure, charred all over, leapt out from it. Wade pointed at his face and shouted. Come out! Look what you did to my handsome face! Francis looked at Wade's charcoal-like face and sneered. You want to kill me? Don't you know? Only I can help you restore this face. Wade froze. Even amidst the sea of fire and the wreckage of corpses, his mind incooperatively paused for a beat, and even his eyes showed a momentary hesitation. And just then, Su Ling's voice suddenly rang out. Wade! Get out of the way quickly! Su Ling raised the pistol in his hand, aimed at the dark corner behind Wade, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! 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 A string of bullets poured into the depths of the darkness. But the next second, clang! 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 That wasn't the sound of hitting flesh, but a harsh clang like metal striking metal. Su Ling's pupils suddenly contracted. It can't really be that guy, can it? The figure that deflected the bullets burst out from the thick smoke. It was a woman even more muscular than an adult man. Wade's face instantly changed. F.A.C.K. He was about to raise his rifle, intending to unleash a burst of close-range fire. However, the charging, muscular woman's figure actually flashed. Like teleportation, she vanished directly from the front. When she reappeared, she was already behind Wade. Snap! Her thick arms suddenly clamped around Wade's neck and arms, a set of disturbingly skilled combat control moves locking Wade in a death grip. Wade was surprised internally, but his mouth didn't stop working. Aren't you a bit too strong for a lady? Don't you need a boyfriend? Perhaps only I can subdue you. Yes, I mean everywhere. Before he could finish speaking, the muscular woman lifted the locked Wade like a sandbag, then arched her lower back and slammed Wade fiercely onto the ground. Boom! Wade's entire body was thrown to the ground like a broken sack, his body twisted into a shape completely inconsistent with human anatomy. But even so, with his healing factor, Wade, despite his horrific state, could still twitch his hands, trying to get up. The muscular woman slowly raised her head, her gaze locking onto Su Ling in the distance, who was holding a pistol and covered in ash. Almost forgot about you, little bug. Sandblast Angel, Gina. A member of the Morlock mutant group, she possesses the mutant ability to gain superhuman strength, explosive power, and increased stamina through adrenaline surges. In the movie, Deadpool 1, she and Francis are the main villains. I forgot about this guy. It seems that by having Wade detonate the research institute early, I completely messed up the entire plot. Su Ling unconsciously tightened his grip on the gun. The woman before him could not only withstand bullets but also boost her power to an extremely dangerous level in a short time. More importantly, her target had shifted from Wade to himself. Francis, whose reinforcements had arrived, also stepped out from behind cover. His peripheral vision caught a semi-melted rebar near his feet, and he picked it up. Crunch. That thick piece of rebar was casually bent into an arc, as if it were a noodle. Francis stepped forward, glanced with disgust at Wade who was struggling to get up, and then mercilessly drove the rebar straight down through Wade's back. The rebar pierced the floor, nailing Wade directly to the ground and completely stripping him of the ability to resist. Francis looked at Gina and said, "The thing I needed you to do. How did it go?" Gina replied coldly. "All the Research Institute data has been destroyed. No traces will be left behind. The surviving experimental subjects have all been transferred to other branches." Francis nodded. "Very good." He casually brushed off the ash that had settled on him and walked toward the depths of the ruins on the other side without looking back. As he walked, he spoke in an impatient, dismissive tone. "Finish this quickly. Don't waste time on a dead man." He still had important things to do. As for dealing with Su Ling, this worthless experimental subject, it wasn't worth his personal effort. Su Ling's brain was working rapidly. He had to find a way to break the situation in the shortest time possible. But Gina clearly wouldn't give him a chance to think. Almost the instant Francis's back disappeared, Gina's fist was already right in front of him. The punch was aimed directly at Su Ling's abdomen. Su Ling's pupils contracted sharply, and he reflexively raised his pistol. Crack! The pistol was instantly smashed and deformed like a thin sheet of iron. Yet, Gina's force hadn't diminished in the slightest. Nima. Before Su Ling could finish the thought, he felt as if he had been hit head-on by a high-speed truck, and the force of the punch sent him flying backward. The wall collapsed, and Su Ling's body slid down weakly, spitting out a large mouthful of blood in midair. His abdomen showed a visible depression, all his ribs were broken, and his spine was bent into a grotesque arc. He wasn't much better off than the prone Wade. Illuminated by the firelight, Gina maintained her forward-leaning posture after throwing the punch. She shook her arm, then walked step by step toward Su Ling, preparing to deliver the final blow to ensure this experimental subject was completely dead. Just as she raised her foot to step forward. Hey! Wade, pierced and nailed to the ground by the rebar, struggled to lift his head. Although his face was burned to charcoal, the corner of his mouth still curled into a standard cocky grin. Hey! You manly woman! Gina's steps halted. Wade continued. You actually killed my brother. Do you know this? Women with your physique are most likely to stay single their whole lives. You will never find a boyfriend. He added a fatal critical hit. Unless you kneel down and beg me right now. I might let you experience what it's like to be a woman. Clearly, even though he was nailed down and unable to move at this moment, Wade was still utilizing his talent for trash talk. Hearing this, Gina's eyelids twitched slightly. Although she was cold-blooded and murderous, she was clearly extremely displeased by the insult, manly woman. Glancing at Su Ling, who was lying motionless and appeared beyond saving, Gina changed her target. She picked up 2 more pieces of rebar from the ground and stood beside Wade. Wade was still preparing to spew more trash talk. Do you have a crush on me? I feel PFF'd. The rebar instantly pierced Wade's body. Not only did it pierce him, but Gina even grabbed the exposed end and forcibly bent the rebar into a U shape. She completely locked Wade firmly onto the ground. The pain was so intense that Wade didn't even have time to scream and instantly passed out. In the air, only a faint wheezing sound from his throat could be heard. Gina snorted coldly, bent down, and inspected her artwork. Seeing that Wade couldn't even twitch, she nodded in satisfaction, then quickly left. Time passed minute by minute. Not long after Gina left, amidst the bloodstains and burnt smell covering the ground, Wade, who had been repeatedly pierced by 3 pieces of rebar and virtually nailed to the floor, suddenly moved. He struggled to lift his head. Although every movement aggravated his puncture wounds, causing blood to seep continuously from around the rebar, he still managed to raise his neck and shift his gaze toward Su Ling, who lay motionless nearby. After the time they had spent together, this Asian teenager had been internally accepted by Wade as a friend. But now, Su Ling's appearance clearly showed no signs of life. Wade's heart sank. A sense of powerlessness, familiar enough to make him nauseous, surged up. That was the emotion he hated the most. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have called you. Wade painfully swallowed a mouthful of blood, yet his lips still held a hint of sad humor. It's a pity, you never got to see the most beautiful woman in the world. Which is to say, my woman. He was about to continue being sentimental, but his eyes suddenly froze. Wait. Motherfool. Wade's pupils instantly shrank to pinpricks. Because he saw that Su Ling, who should have been stone dead, had the bones in his chest automatically twist back into place like a snake. His collapsed abdomen rapidly swelled up, and the burn marks on his skin were repaired like a film running in reverse. In just a few seconds, Su Ling's corpse stood up. At this point, Wade was completely bewildered. You. Did you just resurrect? What the hell is going on? Su Ling rotated his neck, then said. Calm down. I can't die. You can't die either. Wade. Su Ling stopped wasting words. Dragging his still self-repairing body, he walked step by step toward Wade. He grabbed the rebar that was piercing Wade's back. Tough it out. Pull. He used brute force to yank the rebar directly out of Wade's body. Wade looked down and saw that the bloody wound, which should have been fatal, was rapidly healing at a visible rate. I've turned into a zombie. Am I supposed to eat brains now? Or maybe you should let me try a few bites of yours first. Before he could continue his racket, Su Ling slapped him directly on the head. Shut up. Stop shouting. Flames, smoke, and the sound of collapsing structures were constantly closing in from behind. Su Ling grabbed Wade's arm and pulled him forward vigorously. You came in from outside. You should know the way. Tell me, which way do we go? A few minutes later. At the entrance of an abandoned factory located outside the remote suburbs. 2 figures rushed out from inside, looking battered. Su Ling and Wade were covered head to toe in black dust, making them almost unrecognizable. Less than 10 seconds after they rushed out, there was another massive boom. The entire building suddenly collapsed, and flames shot up several meters high. Su Ling stopped, gazing at the night sky illuminated by the flames, looking at the research institute, the source of his past nightmares, being completely consumed. A complex, indescribable emotion surged in his heart. The torment, struggle, and near-death experiences of several days and nights were finally over. He had escaped. But what now? Su Ling stared blankly into the distance, momentarily lost. Since transmigrating, he had been trapped in the dark confines of the research institute and had never contacted the outside world. This meant that Su Ling was an undocumented person without any official identity. In this Marvel universe, there were no records of him whatsoever. The wind blew the ashes from his face. Su Ling adjusted his breathing, suppressing the inexplicable emptiness and unease in his heart. He turned his head and looked at Wade, who was similarly lost in thought beside him. The injury on his chest, where he had been impaled by rebar, had completely healed, leaving only that burnt ghoul face. It was tragic, yet also quite comical. Su Ling pondered for a moment, then asked. Wade, what are your plans now? Wade didn't hesitate for even a second. I already told you, I'm going to find Vanessa. The expected reply. This guy was notoriously known as a love-struck idiot in the Marvel universe. Su Ling nodded, about to say something. Wade suddenly reached out and patted his shoulder. Come with me, brother. I know what you're worried about. Don't forget, I'm a mercenary. He forcefully poked his own chest. Undocumented status, fake IDs, underground connections, gray channels. They're all minor issues for me. Besides, Wade chuckled. With that pretty boy look of yours, there are plenty of guys like you in Brooklyn. No one will suspect you. Su Ling. What the hell? A street somewhere in Brooklyn. A cold wind swept through the alleyway. Su Ling stood alone in the shadows. The tattered, scorched patient gown he wore was long gone, replaced by a hoodie, casual pants, and a pair of cheap cloth shoes. After escaping the research institute hidden inside the abandoned factory, he followed Wade all the way here. Wade went to handle some private matters, and told him to wait here. Su Ling was holding a yellowed old newspaper. He glanced at the publication date next to the headline. 2009. The largest headline on the newspaper read, Stark Industries' new weapon test successful. The military once again praises Tony Stark's contributions. Su Ling's brow furrowed slightly as he read. Tony Stark. The famous Iron Man of the Marvel Universe. As for the time, it was 2009. Piecing this information together, Su Ling roughly understood. His current timeline should be the eve of Iron Man 1. That is, the period when Tony was preparing to go to Afghanistan to demonstrate the missile. Judging by the notation in the corner of the newspaper, more than a month had already passed since then. But this did not prevent Su Ling from judging the general situation. At this point in time, the Avengers did not yet exist. Captain America was still sleeping deep within the ice of the Arctic Ocean, and it would be at least a few more years before he was dug out. As for the major events that would later affect the world, they were all still in the distant future. The Earth right now was in its most safe and peaceful period. At least there were no alien fleets descending from the sky, nor was there a cosmic tyrant thinking of snapping his fingers to wipe out half of all life. Throwing the newspaper into a nearby trash can, Su Ling put his hands in his pockets and looked up at the bustling crowd across the street. Just then, a tall, slender figure wearing a hood approached him from a distance. He recognized that strange way of walking. Somewhere between, my spine hurts terribly, and I just don't want to try anymore. How did it go? Did you find your girlfriend? I found her. The hood was slightly lifted by the wind, revealing the face beneath, which looked like it had been kissed by a gas tank explosion. At this moment, Wade's eyes weren't exactly decadent, but they were certainly as lonely as a stray dog caught in the rain. I didn't dare go see her. Now I'm a complete and utter monster. He looked at the pedestrians across the street who quickly walked around him. Didn't you see the expressions of those passers-by? They're more exaggerated than if they saw a zombie. Wade forced a smile, but it looked worse than crying. If Vanessa saw me looking like this, I can't guarantee she wouldn't mistake me for a zombie and, bang, me with a gun. Su Ling raised his hand and patted Wade's shoulder. Don't worry. Forget one shot, even 10 shots wouldn't kill you. Wade was completely choked up, as if someone had stuffed a golf ball down his throat. His emotions had been building up to their most tragic peak, his eyes stinging slightly. He was just about to launch into a sorrowful monologue. But Su Ling's single sentence instantly pushed him back down onto the chair. Wade mechanically turned his head and glared at Su Ling with his burnt face. Brother, could you show a little respect? I'm complimenting you on your resilience. Resilience my ass. Wade grabbed his hood. In my condition, zombies would have to call me grandpa. Su Ling, isn't that great? You're the most durable of all the monsters. Wade. He suddenly realized something terrifying. His trash talk, when facing Su Ling, was like that of a primary school student just learning to speak. He could curse everyone, and anger any villain to death, but only when facing Su Ling would he be countered into self-doubt within 3 sentences. Wade couldn't help but rub his forehead and waved his hand. All right, let's drop this. I'll take you to meet my friend first. Leaving that sentence behind, he stepped toward the depths of the alley. Su Ling silently followed behind. The two walked past trash cans and graffiti walls, taking several turns before stopping in front of a dilapidated iron door. Wade raised his fist, as familiar with the place as if he were returning home. Weasel. Your daddy's back for you. Open up. Su Ling tilted his head and glanced at the crooked sign next to the entrance. This place must be the mercenary bar that Wade used to frequent in the show. Sure enough, after a few seconds, footsteps sounded from behind the door. Clang. The iron door opened. A man wearing glasses, whose hair looked like he'd been electrocuted, poked his head out. He originally had an expression that said, "Which fool is knocking so hard?" But the next second, he froze completely. Wade. He took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, and then stared at Wade's high-risk decay level face for 3 seconds. What the hell? What happened to you? Were you bitten by a microwave and a cement mixer simultaneously? In front of the bar counter, Weasel wiped a glass, skillfully mixed a cocktail, and pushed the cup toward Su Ling. Here, have a taste. It's compensation for the hard work of you two crawling back from hell. Su Ling nodded in thanks and picked up the cup. Weasel rested his chin on his hand, looked at him twice, and finally couldn't help but speak. So, you two, are you the ones who escaped from the Mutant Research Institute? Weasel's eye twitched upon receiving the answer. Are you sure? He scrutinized Su Ling up and down. Your looks don't seem like they came out of a lab. You look more like you walked off a model wall of some big company. Weasel glanced at Wade, who was picking at his lunch nearby. This guy has already been burned into an ash head, yet after being tortured for so long, you managed to keep your features intact. And you don't even have a single stitch on your body. Hearing this, Wade retorted somewhat unhappily. Can you stop emphasizing the words, ash head? Weasel completely ignored him, staring at Su Ling, still looking utterly confused. But he was, after all, Wade's most reliable friend. Adjusting his glasses, Weasel looked at Wade, who was secretly stuffing a bottle of liquor into his pocket, and sighed. As the most discerning intelligence peddler in the mercenary circle, Weasel knew very well that no matter how much Wade ran his mouth, he would never speak carelessly about crucial matters. Moreover, the fact that Wade contracted cancer was absolutely real. Now, he was inexplicably cured and standing right in front of him. This undeniable fact made him have to believe. Vanessa loves you. Weasel took a sip of his drink and continued. In the year you disappeared, she never gave up looking for you. She asked me, she looked for others, she ran around to all the places you used to frequent, and even checked hospital and police records. Hearing this, Wade froze as if someone had pressed the pause button. For those few seconds, his eyes were slightly red, and his breathing hitched. However, the emotion surged quickly and retreated even faster. Wade suddenly slammed his hand down on the table with a loud paw and roared. I've changed my mind. Before meeting Vanessa, he pointed at his scarred face. I have to find that fool Francis first. Force him to cure me. And then return everything he did to me, without holding anything back. Wade paused for half a second, then suddenly turned his head to look at Su Ling next to him. Oh, right. Francis, he doesn't know we're still alive, does he? Su Ling put down the glass in his hand and nodded. Yes, he probably thinks we're both dead. Speaking of which, the image of Gina, the powerhouse woman with abnormal strength, flashed deep in Su Ling's mind. If it weren't for the heaven-defying effect of the horse talisman pulling his lifeline back at the critical moment, he would probably be on his way to reincarnation right now. Su Ling glanced at Wade, who was still roaring and cursing, his gaze lingering on that face that couldn't be ruined any further. Actually, Su Ling had been thinking, could the horse talisman cure Wade's disfigurement? But he never intended to actually try, from beginning to end. It wasn't because he didn't want to help. It was because it was too dangerous. The horse talisman is the power that cleanses everything and repairs everything. It can reattach broken bones and reshape shattered statues from the ground. If used on Wade, if he wasn't careful, the horse talisman might cure the wounds and restore his face, but also conveniently cleanse away the healing factor within his body. Moreover, Su Ling, who knew the plot well, was too clear about one thing. Francis wouldn't just disappear like that, he would show up sooner or later. The bar fell silent for a short while. What followed were meaningless pleasantries. To disguise his identity, Wade seriously gave himself a new name, Captain Wade. Obviously, this was plagiarizing Captain America. And it was a clumsy imitation that even a primary school student could spot flaws in. Su Ling rejected him without even thinking. Don't be disgusting, call yourself, Deadpool. Deadpool. Wade froze for 2 seconds, then suddenly his eyes lit up. This is 10 times cooler than Captain Wade. Dangerous, ruthless, and explosively cool. It even makes people want to buy my merchandise. I love it. Su Ling took a sip of the cocktail and asked. Whether the name can sell merchandise isn't important. Compared to that, I'm more concerned about how you plan to find Francis. Wade restrained his joking expression, displaying the kind of smile that belonged somewhere between a madman and a warrior. Francis needs a large number of experimental subjects, but they dare not be too high profile, afraid of being noticed by the higher-ups. So their recruitment can only be carried out in secret, such as the black market, underground fighting rings, places where no one asks and no one looks. Follow this lead, and we'll find that fool's lair sooner or later. Su Ling hummed softly and did not continue the topic. On the one hand, Wade's logic of action was often more chaotic than his face. On the other hand, although he possessed the horse talisman, from the perspective of overall combat power, he essentially had no fighting ability. He had strength, but insufficient reaction speed and no close combat skills. He only managed to take down a guard at the research institute by relying on a sneak attack. Moreover, this was the free America, and thermal weapons were the main theme. His abilities were more like a trump card than a weapon for frontal combat. Wade thought the same way. He didn't want Su Ling involved in his revenge plan. A top mercenary didn't need a novice newbie to help. Furthermore, Wade was now completely immersed in the excitement of his new name, acting like a primary school student receiving a transformation belt for the first time. He muttered to himself while tracing the letters on the tabletop with his fingertip. D. E. A. D. P. O. O. L. Tisk. This name is really cool. Su Ling looked at this childish fellow and shook his head with a smile. Of course. He hadn't forgotten the moment Gina the powerhouse woman sent him flying, nor the scenes of being tortured half to death by Francis in the laboratory. He would never let go of those grudges. Right now, Su Ling had a more urgent problem. That was solving his identity issue. Su Ling, having traveled to this world, was a complete undocumented resident. To put it bluntly, he couldn't even get a phone card now. This was also the real reason Wade brought him to Weasel today. Su Ling rubbed his chin, his gaze slowly turning toward Weasel behind the bar. I heard you recruit mercenaries here. Do you think I'm suitable? At the bar counter, only Su Ling and Weasel remained. Wade had left ahead of them to prepare for the upcoming operation. Weasel wiped his hands with a towel, pondered for a moment, then looked up and asked. Are you sure you want to be a mercenary? There was no sarcasm in his tone, only probing and caution. After all, in this free U.S., mercenary isn't just a title you throw around. It's a business of real knives and guns, of shedding blood and losing lives, where you bet your life once you sign a contract. Most importantly, Weasel really couldn't associate the clean-cut, delicate-looking young man in front of him, who even drank his wine refinedly, with the word mercenary. However, for Wade's sake, he didn't point this out. He just looked at Su Ling with an expression that said, I'll hold back for now. As a transmigrator, Su Ling naturally understood Weasel's methods. His abilities weren't in combat or marksmanship. Instead, they lay in connections, information, the black market, and channels. While running this mercenary bar, Weasel held a hidden and vast underground network. He would provide suitable commissions to various mercenaries, taking a portion of the commission. To put it plainly, he was an NPC in a quest hall. Of course, this was just the surface operation. If you had enough money, Weasel could also sell you more. For example, powerful firearms, and more importantly, forged identities. And this was exactly what Su Ling needed most. Currently, he lacked both money and a legal identity. You know, the US now was full of electronic eyes everywhere. Having transmigrated, he would rather die than live a life of scurrying around with his head in his hands. So, Su Ling chose to take the initiative. Weasel stared at him, sizing him up for a few seconds, then pondered for a moment before slowly speaking. All right, for Wade's sake, he said, pulling out a stack of cards from behind the bar and spreading them in front of Su Ling. Although you might have heard about it from Wade, I'll still briefly explain our rules to you according to procedure. We divide commissions into two types, gold cards and black cards. Weasel said, turning a gold card around. Gold cards represent simple, direct tasks with low risk. The advantage is that you don't take on much risk, the work isn't too complicated, and the remuneration is stable but not overly generous. It's suitable for those who want to earn some steady money, or for beginners. Su Ling asked, seizing the opportunity. What about black cards? Weasel handed over a black card. There were no fancy words on the card face, only a string of numbers. Black card commissions are generally more difficult, involve more people, are more secretive, and have stricter requirements for the executor. The advantage, well, is more money. But I must state first, if you take a black card job, the method of completion is up to you. I will not interfere, nor will I save you. He chugged the rest of the beer in his glass, wiped the foam from his lips, and continued to add. Simply put, you have to bear all the risks yourself. Even if you're Wade's friend, I won't take the blame for you then. I'm an intelligence merchant, not a charity organization that cleans up messes, understand? Su Ling nodded, not feeling dissatisfied by Weasel's tone. On the contrary, he thought it was very normal. This was the attitude an intelligence merchant should have. Business was always like this. The black market has its rules, and mercenaries have their rules. Moreover, Su Ling knew very well that if it were Wade, Weasel probably wouldn't say a word and would just throw the mission in his face. I need to get stronger quickly. Thinking of this, Su Ling reached out and casually picked up a card from the table. These cards all had the target person's name printed on them, looking very ordinary from the front. And on the back of each card, there was a piece of paper attached. That was the specific mission description, detailing the target, the content of the commission, and the reward. As Weasel said, gold card rewards were generally not high, mostly ranging from $50 to $200, belonging to the category of labor for money jobs. For example, teaching a cheating lover a lesson, giving a small show of force to scare off a stalker, or taking sensitive photos from someone's phone to give them a fright. Compared to these unremarkable gold cards, the black cards seemed a bit dangerous. Assassinate Russian mafia member Claft, reward $5,000. Swap medical samples at Bailey's Hospital, reward $10,000. Kidnap wealthy businessman's daughter Susan, reward $100,000. Clearly, black card commissions almost all pointed to special individuals and sensitive locations. These jobs were not simple petty thefts but required the use of illicit means. If caught, the outcome would definitely not be just a temporary detention, it would be equivalent to reincarnation in minutes. He gave up the idea of continuing to read after seeing half of them. Currently, he was simply not equipped to take on such high-difficulty missions. Especially those involving gang factions. Su Ling, at present, didn't even have a legal ID. Acting rashly would only bring him a host of enemies for no reason. Weasel saw Su Ling's contemplative look, and the corner of his mouth quirked up as he teased. Scared, aren't you? That's normal. Money isn't that easy to earn. Su Ling smiled, just about to say something, but as the words reached his lips, his central vision suddenly shook. A transparent light screen emerged from the void. At the same time, a faint beeping sound accompanied it. Ding! Su Ling's pupils contracted. Soon, a blue virtual box rapidly expanded in front of him, and text appeared on the transparent light screen. Mission name. As an emissary of justice, you must strike hard. Mission content. Kill 30 deeply sinful villains, 0/30. Mission reward. Plunder points *1. The sudden notification brought an indescribable emotion to Su Ling's heart. The long-awaited mission finally appeared. That familiar feeling from the system made his blood run half a degree hotter. But after the excitement, Su Ling's rationality quickly returned. Su Ling squinted, staring at the virtual box in front of him, looking it over and over. Deeply sinful villains. What did that mean? He frowned slightly, tapping his fingertips on the bar counter. The system obviously wouldn't let him kill innocent people indiscriminately. Will the system mark those villains for me? I don't think so. It wouldn't be that kind. As his thoughts deepened, Weasel in front of him began to put away the black cards. All right. Stop staring at those black cards. As a newcomer like you, you should start with gold card missions first. Weasel muttered as he stuffed the black cards back into the cabinet. Black cards are not something you can take on right now. Don't dream about it yet. At most, you can take some entry-level gold card jobs. Once you survive 3 or 4, then we can talk about other things. Bang! A crisp sound echoed in the bar. Before Weasel could push the black cards back into the drawer, Su Ling's hand was already firmly pressed on a card. Weasel. Su Ling looked up, a characteristic smile on his lips. This commission. He raised a finger, picked up one of the black cards, and waved it in front of Weasel. I'll take it. Weasel froze. His gaze followed Su Ling's fingertip, falling on the back of the black card held in his hand. Assassinate Russian mafia member Claft. Reward, 5,000 US dollars. The next second, Weasel's face began to change like a slideshow. Shock, confusion, questioning life, then forcibly maintaining composure. Finally, it solidified into a complex expression that screamed, "Are you out of your mind?" What the hell? Weasel pointed at the black card, then at Su Ling, his lips trembling for a long time before he squeezed out a sentence. A black card right off the bat. Su Ling smiled and nodded. Weasel snatched the black card back with a slap. Fearing he had misread it, he looked at it carefully several more times before looking up and saying, "Did you see clearly? This is a gang's commission." His voice suddenly rose. "Are you sure? Are you really sure? Brother, do you know what the Russian mafia means? That's not a small organization of 3 to 5 people with 3 to 5 guns." Su Ling shrugged. He had seen many Marvel works, and he naturally knew a thing or two about the Russian mafia in them. "I know. You know and you still accept it." Weasel slapped the table repeatedly. "Provoking an organization of this level, are you trying to buy yourself a coffin in advance or what? You know, even Wade, that fearless lunatic who dared to tease federal agents, wasn't as exaggerated as you." Su Ling suddenly changed his expression. His eyes, which had just been as calm as water, instantly became serious, even carrying a hint of heroic spirit. "I mainly want to combat evil. I've always disliked these gang organizations that engage in petty thievery the most." After speaking, he even nodded slightly, as if emphasizing that his conscience was clear. He was just like those passionate protagonists in TV shows who act on behalf of heaven. Silence. Extreme silence. Weasel froze like a system blue screen. Many words were on the tip of his tongue, but he just couldn't say them. "Crazy, they're all crazy." He covered his face and took several deep breaths. "You wait. The dark alley had a damp, musty smell." Su Ling, who had just left the bar, walked through it, toying with the black card between his fingers. Assassinate Russian mafia member Claft. Reward, 5,000 US dollars. This was one of the less difficult black cards from the pile earlier. It wasn't that he didn't want to take on a higher level one. It was because all black cards required a 10% deposit of the reward before acceptance. A mission with a 100,000 reward would require a 10,000 deposit. For a 1 million reward, the deposit was 100,000. For Su Ling, who only had a few dollars and couldn't even afford a hot dog, a deposit non-existent. Fortunately, Weasel ultimately paid the deposit for him. Perhaps out of curiosity, helplessness, or thinking it would be a pity for Su Ling to die too quickly, the reasons were somewhat complex. After confirming that Su Ling accepted the commission, Weasel's professional mode immediately went online, providing him with a brief but clear intelligence report. Information such as target Claft's appearance and physique, his 3 frequently appearing strongholds, and common companions among his subordinates. In addition, Weasel also provided a basic service as per the rules. He arranged a temporary identity for Su Ling. It wasn't a perfectly forged one, but a fake identity that could only last for a short time and pass ordinary checks. But for the current Su Ling, this was enough to move freely in the city. Although Weasel talked a lot, the rules in this line of work were very strict. Accepting a black card, even the lowest level, required providing this basic intelligence and a temporary identity. This was a symbol of a black market contract. One of the strongholds marked in the intelligence was about a few kilometers from the bar. The direction Weasel gave was only a vague range, and he didn't even bother to draw a complete map, clearly intending for Su Ling to figure it out himself. Su Ling, however, was unfamiliar with this area, and as he walked, he even began to doubt his direction. The layout of these broken streets all looked similar. Relying solely on intuition was tantamount to wandering aimlessly. In this situation, taking a taxi would be a good option. But this was only an ideal situation. The reality was that Su Ling couldn't even pull out a complete banknote from his pocket. His jacket pocket contained nothing but the temporary ID card Weasel gave him, the black card, and a piece of paper with intelligence written on it. Would it be too much to borrow $10 from Weasel just now? Su Ling smiled, then suppressed the thought of borrowing $10. Weasel had already paid the deposit for him. He remembered this favor, and asking for money again would seem brazen. Just as he was about to leave the alley, two young men suddenly darted out from the shadow, blocking his path. Hey, Asian boy, stop. The leader revealed two gleaming white front teeth. Hand over your money and phone obediently, or we'll make you sleep here. The other follower grinned behind him, looking ready to watch a show. However, no sooner had the young man with the two big front teeth finished speaking than he suddenly realized something extremely strange. The Asian boy opposite him was gone. Huh. Before he could react, his vision suddenly darkened. The next instant, Su Ling flashed in front of him like an afterimage, directly raising his leg and kicking him squarely in the face. Ah! The front tooth didn't even have time to fully scream before his entire face twisted to the side, and he flew backward, sliding a full meter along the alley ground before stopping. After landing, he let out an unconscious whimper, completely losing all threat. The other black youth's eyes widened as if they would pop out of his sockets. They had encountered targets who resisted during robberies, and they had seen opponents who could fight. But what the hell was this, kicking someone directly in the face without saying a word? Was this even humanly possible? You. The black youth pointed at Su Ling, his finger trembling incessantly, then turned to run. However, as soon as he took a step, Su Ling's shadow was already behind him. The black youth felt a sudden numbness at the back of his neck, and his whole body was lifted as if by a hand, his consciousness constantly scattering in a dizzying spin, finally crashing onto the concrete ground with a thump. The two youths lay sprawled on the ground, one with a nosebleed, the other foaming at the mouth. Su Ling patted his pant leg, having brushed away two annoying flies. No combat experience. Yes. But that was under normal circumstances. He was still not someone ordinary thugs could mess with. With a thought, a virtual box popped up in front of Su Ling again. Mission name. As a righteous envoy, you must strike hard. Mission content. Kill 30 heinous villains, 0/30ths. The count had not increased. It seems these two petty thugs don't meet the system's criteria for heinous. Su Ling rested his chin on one hand. No, that's not right. Could it be that kill wasn't triggered? Thinking this, Su Ling took a few quick steps forward, casually rummaged through the two men's pockets, and in addition to a few coins and an old flip phone, he also found a pistol on the front tooth's waist. He weighed the pistol in his hand a few times, then checked the magazine, which contained 3 bullets. What's that old saying again? Su Ling said, aiming the black gun barrel at one of the black youths. Practice is the sole criterion for testing truth. Just as Su Ling's finger pressed the trigger, a virtual box suddenly appeared. Target does not meet requirements. Huh. Su Ling froze for half a second, then immediately understood. Even killing these two now wouldn't increase the mission progress by a single point. After thinking for a few seconds, Su Ling pointed the muzzle upward and methodically tucked the gun back into his waist. His mind was working faster than before. The system has its filtering logic. Acting blindly is not only useless but will also waste ammunition and expose himself. Neither could happen to him, a newcomer to the battlefield. Since these prey were of no use to him, the hunter, Su Ling was unwilling to stay here any longer. He quickly walked through the alley entrance and reached the street-side taxi stand, where several empty cars were parked under the streetlights. He took out the few coins he had just lifted from the two thugs and handed them to the driver. After Su Ling told him the destination, the car slowly moved forward. Night had completely fallen. Neon lights constantly flickered, bringing the city back to life under the cover of night. The true city that never sleeps was only just beginning. In a district located on the west bank, an old taxi slowly stopped by the roadside. Su Ling pushed the car door open, got out, shook the dust off his clothes, and exhaled. This is the last one. He looked up at the eerily quiet area ahead and muttered softly. The intelligence Weasel gave me shouldn't be wrong, right? The previous two locations were completely deserted. The entire night. Riding in the car had made his back sore and his legs numb. He had navigated the roads better than a delivery driver. He had even changed drivers twice, yet he hadn't even seen Claft's shadow. Either the place was empty, or a few people were drinking, or only rats were wandering around. If this continued, he would seriously have to consider whether Weasel had tricked him. But regardless, since he was already here, he couldn't just leave. After many twists and turns, Su Ling walked through a dimly lit small street, following the vaguely described location from the intelligence report. Finally, he stopped at the entrance of a slightly dilapidated apartment building. This should be the place. Su Ling walked into the elevator and pressed the number for the target floor. The elevator door slowly closed. He was the only person left in the confined space. Su Ling leaned against the elevator wall and began planning his next course of action. First, he did not plan to force his way in. Especially when dealing with someone backed by the gang. If he opened the door and immediately attacked, and missed a shot, half an hour later everyone in the apartment would know an Asian kid had come to die. Second, he didn't want to attract too much attention. Gang retaliation was no joke, especially when dealing with ruthless characters from Russia who valued the Russian aesthetic of violence. Charge directly. That would be a suicidal act lacking in martial virtue. So, a simple, crude, yet effective method quickly surfaced in his mind. Locate the target, then become a lurker and track them, and when he encountered a deserted blind spot, he would take them out with a single shot. As long as his movements were fast and concealed, by the time the gang reacted, the killer would have already vanished to some corner of the city. I'll stick to this plan. Ding. After the elevator door opened, Su Ling's expression gradually froze. Outside the door stood a circle of burly men, black jackets, thick necks, and faces that clearly belonged to unreasonable people. The man in the center, who had a striking tattoo on the side of his face, was exactly the target Su Ling was looking for, Claft. He was carrying a silver briefcase, appearing to have just finished some transaction. When these men saw Su Ling in the elevator, they all paused for a moment. Then, as if drawn to it, their gazes focused on the pistol tucked into his waist. The air froze at this moment. Su Ling lightly coughed, forcing out a smile that could be called a professional fake smile. I'm just passing by. Does anyone believe me? No one spoke. The next second, some Russian guy suddenly roared. Kill him. Then the world exploded. Da 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 da. Gunfire hammered down like a torrential rain. At such close range, it was impossible for Su Ling to react. Bullets furiously struck his body, and blood blossoms bloomed across his chest, shoulders, and abdomen. The massive impact force threw Su Ling backward, his back slamming directly into the elevator wall with a dull thud. Blood flowed down his clothes, dripping onto the metal floor. 5 seconds later, the gunfire finally ceased. Su Ling, covered in blood, slowly slid down the wall. Claft frowned, glanced at him, and cursed casually. Where did this guy pop out from? The big men also started chattering. Could it be that other gangs knew about our transaction tonight and sent someone to stop us? Send one person. Only an idiot would do that. Trash like this is dead, what's there to worry about? Claft waved his hand impatiently. Go, 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 don't waste time, we still have a mission to complete. The men quickly walked toward the staircase in the opposite direction, clearly unwilling to stay there for another second. Because the elevator door sensed someone collapsed in the doorway, it remained half open and half closed. Claft and his group walked further away, completely ignoring the corpse in the elevator. In their perception, that level of firepower was enough to blow a bull to pieces. However, just as the men were about to turn the corner and completely disappear from view. Clack! The fingers of the body inside the elevator, which should have been stone cold dead, moved. Immediately afterward, the chest of the blood-soaked corpse slightly rose and fell. The bullets were squeezed out of the wounds, which then rapidly healed. The power of the horse talisman was operating at full speed within Su Ling's body. After recovering, he didn't hesitate at all, raising the small caliber pistol that only had 3 rounds left. Bang! 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 Bullets sliced through the night air, and the 3 bodies at the end of the corridor immediately fell. Almost simultaneously, the long-awaited mechanical prompt finally sounded in Su Ling's ear. Conditions met. Mission content. Kill 30 heinous villains, 1/30th. Su Ling froze for a moment. He clearly killed 3 people, and their bodies were still lying there, so why did it only count as 1? Could it be that the other 2 don't count as heinous villains? You bunch of fool, you're not qualified at all. Are you even gang members anymore? Su Ling cursed under his breath, but he didn't have time to keep thinking. He pushed off with his legs and charged forward. The commission hasn't been completed yet. The 3 gunshots just now made the group of people who were quickly preparing to leave stop in their tracks. As the boss of these Russian strongmen, Klaft couldn't help but curse angrily. What's going on? Whose gun went off? Before he finished speaking, his pupils suddenly constricted to the size of a needle tip. Because in the distance, a figure was rushing towards them at extreme speed. After clearly seeing who it was, Klaft's brain immediately crashed. Wasn't that the Asian kid they just riddled with bullets? The person who had just been shot against the wall, spitting blood, and convulsing, was now running even faster than them, as if resurrected. God! Am I seeing a ghost? Didn't that guy die? This is impossible. The somewhat narrow corridor instantly descended into chaos due to the appearance of this corpse. Klaft was the first to react. He shouted, "Shoot! Shoot! Hurry up and shoot!" But this time was different. Facing the monster that had resurrected from a pool of blood and was charging at an outrageous speed, not a single one of these Russian strongmen, who usually killed without blinking in the gang, dared to raise their gun. Yes, not a single one. Their fingertips were firmly pressed near the trigger, yet they were frozen stiff like blocks of ice, and even their breathing became ragged. Who could guarantee that thing was human? What if he was a ghost who had just climbed back from hell? Especially since Su Ling's clothes were still stained with blood, the visual impact of this half-man, half-ghost figure struck directly at their hearts. After seeing this scene, Klaft was so angry he nearly fainted. What are you useless pieces of trash waiting for? He's charging over. He's charging over. Still, no one dared to move. Klaft completely lost it. He shoved aside the closest subordinate and snatched the rifle from his arms. Get lost. Click. He raised the gun, aiming the muzzle directly at Su Ling, who was still sprinting towards him. Go to hell. You monster. Klaft roared, his finger slamming down on the trigger. However, Su Ling merely sneered. A tough fight. He had anticipated it long ago. But in this current situation, how could this be called a tough fight? It had clearly turned into a true man's 1v1 battle. He wasn't afraid of a whole group of people, so why would he fear Klaft, who was roaring while his legs trembled? Just as the bullet sprayed out of the barrel, Su Ling's body shifted half a step sideways, and his right wrist flipped sharply. Whoosh! A cold glint traced a perfect arc through the corridor. That was the dagger he had just snagged from the corpses he dealt with earlier. PFF'd. The dagger accurately plunged into Klaft's wrist. Ah! Klaft screamed in agony, the severe pain in his wrist causing the muzzle of the gun in his hand to fly upwards. Da 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 da. Flames sprayed wildly. But not towards Su Ling, instead, they swept across the ceiling. Seeing their boss rolling on the ground like a wild dog, how could the subordinates, whose guts had already been scared out of them, dare to pretend to be tough guys anymore? One of them first gasped sharply, then screamed as if seeing a ghost. Run! They fled, shoving each other like rats whose tails were set on fire, even wishing to step on those they usually called brothers just to push forward. The entire corridor became a disaster scene because of Su Ling's appearance. But for Su Ling, this group of people was just mobile experience packs. Better to kill by mistake than to let one escape. He raised his foot and kicked Klaft directly in the stomach. The immense force sent the wailing man flying straight into the wall. Su Ling didn't even look at him. He bent down, seizing the rifle Klaft had dropped. Thank you for letting me borrow this. Raise the gun, aim. Da 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 da. The muzzle spat out bullets, and the panicked gang members were struck one after another. Splatters of blood flew under the dim yellow light, mixing screams and gunfire. The rifle didn't stop firing for a second. Sending them off to reincarnation was something he, the emissary of justice, had to do. The escape routes of the 7 gang members were completely terminated by the rifle's fury. As the last strongman was hit in the back by a bullet and collapsed to the ground, the corridor finally fell silent. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder and heavy blood, the walls were pocked with bullet holes, and corpses lay scattered across the floor. Su Ling tossed aside the rifle, whose magazine was now empty, but his brows were tightly furrowed. Because no mechanical prompt sound rang out in his ear. This meant that killing 7 gang members had not advanced the mission progress at all. Before these gang members fell, not even the previous prompt box indicating target does not meet requirements had appeared. What's going on? Another 0 yield. Why are these gang members so useless? Su Ling couldn't help but spit on the ground. They're all so big and have fiercer tattoos than anyone else, yet they don't even count as grievously wicked. I wasted all that effort spraying them. Su Ling rubbed his sun temples helplessly. The requirements of this system are truly a mystery. And right at that moment, the corpse beside him suddenly moved. Claft secretly lifted his eyelid a crack. He happened to meet Su Ling's expression of not being satisfied even after slaughtering the mobs, which nearly made his heart stop instantly from fright. The next second, Claft immediately closed it again, and even tried hard to tilt his head, afraid his acting wasn't convincing enough. Unfortunately, although Su Ling wasn't police, he wasn't an ordinary person either. Playing dead. Who are you trying to fool? Footsteps sounded next to Claft's ear, and he continuously roared internally. Don't come over. Don't come over. But inevitably, Su Ling came. He walked up to Claft, extended his right hand, and single-handedly lifted Claft completely off the ground like a chick. Su Ling looked at his tightly closed eyes and slowly said, "Nice acting, but was that twitch of your finger just now your way of greeting me? Claft, open your eyes." The scolded Claft could only tremble as he opened his eyes. His entire face was pale with pain, but even more so with terror. Su Ling pondered for a moment and asked, "Tell me, out of the 10 people I just killed, who was the worst?" Claft, "What the hell? You just turned them into meat patties, and now you're asking me who was the worst? Who here is even half as bad as you are?" He stared at Su Ling with a face full of fear, unsure what to say. Su Ling grew impatient and said, "If you continue to stay silent, I will cut off your mouth and stick it onto your asshole." Claft shuddered all over, his speech rate as fast as a machine gun. Steve is the worst. He's super bad. Bad right down to the bone. He killed many people. More than me. Su Ling raised an eyebrow and continued to ask. What about the others? What bad things did they do? Claft thought for 2 seconds, then said with a mournful expression. I don't know. They were all peripheral members, at most collecting protection fees. The only true core members were just Steve and me. Su Ling understood instantly. After all that trouble, these guys were all just low-level nobodies. No wonder the progress didn't increase. Su Ling looked at the scattered corpses on the ground and grew increasingly irritated the more he thought about it. Then, he looked up at Claft, whom he was holding. "So, you are the most grievously wicked one in this group." Claft was shaking like a sieve. "Why yes. Yes. Absolutely. And no. I'm a good person. I often help old grandmothers cross the street, and also." Crack. Claft's voice abruptly stopped. Su Ling's hand twisted as easily as snapping a wet branch. Claft's neck was twisted at a grotesque angle, and his body completely lost support. The next second. Condition met. Mission content. Kill 30 grievously wicked villains, 2/30. After the mechanical sound disappeared, Su Ling turned to look at the silver-white box on the ground. "I have to take some spoils of war with me." He walked over, picked up the handle, and then completely disappeared at the end of the corridor. 1 o'clock in the morning. Su Ling changed into a set of clean clothes, dealt with all the residual scent of blood on his body, and then walked toward the mercenary bar. Although it was already deep into the night, for the people in this place, the nightlife was just beginning. Pushing open the rusty main door, the door panel emitted a harsh creaking sound. Su Ling had barely taken 2 steps inside when a deafening roar immediately erupted from the bar. Burly men banging bottles on tables, fat guys gambling until their faces were red in the corner, and even 2 cross-dressers wearing black stockings. Clearly, these were all mercenaries. Drinking, shouting, fighting, gambling, this was their way of releasing stress and numbing themselves. Su Ling walked up to the bar and placed the silver white box on the counter. With another thwack, he placed the black card in front of Weasel. Weasel was drinking beer, and the moment he saw Su Ling, he nearly spat his mouthful of drink onto the ceiling. His eyes widened to the size of a bottle bottom. The commission, solved. Wait, no, you failed a chase and ran back, expecting me to clean up your mess, right? I told you, I'm not responsible for. He hadn't finished speaking. Su Ling slowly pulled out the old flip phone he had snatched from the black youth and flipped it open with a click, right in front of Weasel. The screen lit up with a crude but perfectly clear image, Claft's face, staring wide-eyed in death. Weasel. The expression on his face immediately began cycling through a slideshow. From shock to seeing a ghost, then to doubting reality. Weasel pointed at the photo, then pointed at Su Ling. You actually finished it. No offense, but that defies logic. Su Ling shrugged, too lazy to explain. The photo already explained everything. Shocked as he was, the facts laid before him were undeniable. Weasel took a deep breath and quickly snatched up the black card with a smack. He cleared his throat, switching his tone to that of an information broker. All right, since the commission is complete, according to the rules, I will submit it for confirmation first. Once confirmed, you will immediately receive the employer's reward. Weasel pointed to the black card. I covered the deposit, so you have to pay me back first. Also, I have to take a 10% service fee from the reward. Su Ling nodded. These rules were clearly stated up front. Weasel wasn't overcharging. Him covering the deposit had already been a huge help. Weasel continued. The remaining reward will be credited to your account at that time. You should provide a bank card as soon as possible so I can transfer the money directly into your account. Su Ling shook his head. A bank card? That won't work. I don't even have a legal identity. Once you get the rest of the money, help me sort out an identity. Weasel stared at Su Ling, silent for several seconds. It was as if he was confirming whether this young lunatic was about to pull another stunt. After a moment, he rubbed his temples, wearing an expression that said, I really can't deal with you. Getting an identity is doable. But it doesn't come cheap. He raised two fingers, making a two gesture. That means you now owe me $20,000. Su Ling. A string of question marks instantly popped up above his head. What the heck? He hadn't even touched his first pot of gold, yet he somehow ended up owing Weasel $20,000. Wait a minute. I killed the target, brought back the evidence, and completed the black card mission. And then, I still owe $20,000. Weasel patted his shoulder, a slightly smug grin appearing on his face. I didn't earn a single cent from you for the channel fees, relationship fees, and various other costs involved in getting you an identity. It's not just Dragon Country, America requires social networking and favors too. Su Ling scratched his head. This was truly ridiculous. Seeing his expression, Weasel chuckled twice. Welcome to the world of mercenaries, brother. The first rule of working here is. He made a gesture that Su Ling couldn't understand. The more capable you are, the more debt you accumulate. Su Ling smiled and remained silent. Given the current situation, he didn't have time to haggle with Weasel over whether to owe $20,000 first or get an identity first. The mission wasn't fully done, the plunder points hadn't been acquired, and the road ahead was still full of unknowns. Su Ling had to establish his foundation quickly. Right, do you know where there's a suitable rental house? I mean, the kind that doesn't require identity registration. You know, my situation is similar to Wade's, it's not good for people to know my whereabouts. Weasel understood this point. He didn't doubt Su Ling at all. After all, a weirdo who could run back alive from the gang was indeed a bit like that idiot Wade. Weasel thought for a moment, then said, I actually do have an empty room. It's not luxurious, but it's absolutely hidden. No one knows it belongs to me, and no one will investigate that direction. Su Ling gave a soft affirmation and asked, what about the price? Weasel wore the expression of a shrewd merchant but still patted his chest. Since you're a newcomer and a friend of Wade's, I'll give you a 20% discount. Fine, I accept the offer. Seeing Su Ling nod, Weasel finally shifted his attention to the silver box on the counter. Speaking of which, I was curious earlier, what is this? Claft gave it to me. Su Ling took a sip of beer and found it tasted awful. You know, I'm not good at refusing people. Weasel. You smashed the guy, and he still gave you something. Are you taking me for an idiot? Weasel, with a dark expression of utter disbelief, stared at Su Ling for a long time before reluctantly turning his attention back to the box. His gaze circled the box again and again before he reached out and touched the edge, saying, "It's a high-grade safe made of specialized material. External force won't break it open. How do you plan to handle it? Take it home and use it as a stool." Su Ling rubbed his chin, seriously considering for a second. "I haven't decided what to do yet. Is this thing valuable?" Weasel nodded, his tone becoming several degrees more serious than before. "Of course it's valuable. This kind of alloy material is generally only used by top-tier powers." He knocked on the box again. "Forget street gangs, even ordinary transnational crime organizations can't afford a safe of this caliber. Logically speaking, the Russian mafia behind Claft shouldn't spend this much money on a box like this." The more Weasel thought about it, the more wrong it felt. "This is truly strange. You'd better be careful." After saying that, Weasel looked up again, ready to offer a few more warnings, but he suddenly froze. Su Ling, standing before him, showed not a hint of nervousness or fear. Instead, his eyes had brightened. Su Ling reached out and patted the silver box. "According to you, this thing is priceless, right?" Weasel nodded mechanically, suddenly feeling an extremely strong sense of foreboding. This kid wasn't about to embark on some dangerous path, was he? No way, no way. The next day, after Su Ling received the set of clattering keys from the Weasel, he rushed over to the address almost immediately. Standing in front of the target location, Su Ling looked up. Before him was a 6-story apartment building that looked quite old. The paint on the walls was peeling like dry skin, and a few chunks fell off with every gust of wind. Both sides of the street were lined with similar dilapidated buildings from the 80s and 90s, with several cheap grocery stores and small restaurants crammed together. More importantly, this area was near the west side of Manhattan Island. Just a little further down the road was the legendary slum. It was said that at night, 3 sounds could be heard there. The sound of cars, the sound of cursing, and the sound of gunshots. The one you didn't want to hear. But Su Ling only glanced at it before looking away. He wasn't scared at all. After all, what he experienced in the research institute was infinitely more brutal than the gang, the slum, or street violence. This little mess. It truly couldn't frighten him. Su Ling exhaled and muttered to himself. "This place. I'll use it as a temporary base for now." Carrying the silver box, he walked toward the apartment's main entrance. Su Ling followed the apartment numbers all the way to the back and quickly found the room with the number the Weasel had given him. The key slid into the lock, a soft click sounded, and the door swung open. The next second, a blast of air mixed with various smells rushed out. Holy hell! Su Ling was almost choked to tears by the stench. The sight inside the room was even more shocking than the smell. The ripped holes in the worn-out sofa, the stains on the carpet, the window panes blocked by old newspapers, the entire room exuded the strong scent of a discarded materials distribution center. This is very much the Weasel's style. It was obvious that the Weasel hadn't just neglected to clean for a long time, but fundamentally didn't live here. Su Ling could only describe this room with 4 words: everything must go. He couldn't even imagine what the Weasel had done here before. Maybe deals, maybe kidnappings, maybe. Shaking his head, Su Ling's mind refused to continue that train of thought. All right. He casually placed the silver box in the only relatively clean corner, rolled up his sleeves, and took a deep breath. Real man's deep clean, initiate. As time passed, the room, which had initially looked like a crime scene, gradually took on the outline of a residence. Su Ling collapsed onto the sofa he had painstakingly scrubbed clean, supporting his head with one hand, looking utterly exhausted after a busy day. But his gaze remained fixed on the silver safe in the corner of the room. The Weasel couldn't possibly lie to him. Although that guy was cunning, he wouldn't be stupid enough to deceive a monster who had just finished killing core gang members and brought the box back. Therefore, this item was indeed priceless. Since it's so valuable. Doesn't that also mean that the sin of the people who want to steal it will also be quite considerable? Just then, the line of mission text from the system seemed to flash in his mind. Wicked person of deep sin. Su Ling narrowed his eyes, quickly connecting the logic in his mind. The focus of the system was obvious. It wasn't, wicked person. It wasn't, kill. It was the two words, sin. Without sufficient criminal experience, even a gang member was just an ordinary hooligan. Take the group of Russian tough guys yesterday, for example. He thought they were all cold-blooded killers covered in tattoos, but what happened? They were all shot dead, and he didn't gain any progress. But Clapton, that poor soul Su Ling didn't even realize was Steve were different. As core members of the gang, they participated in far more criminal activities, and after taking them out, his progress moved forward slightly. Therefore, a daring plan quietly took shape in Su Ling's mind. Since the box is priceless, the people who try to steal my box, their sin definitely won't be low. Of course, this was just his deduction. Su Ling raised his eyes and looked out the window. The sunset had completely fallen, and the city's night spread out like ink. Su Ling no longer hesitated. He stood up, carrying the priceless silver safe, and walked toward the door, on a street not far from the apartment. Su Ling pinned a white hooligan against the wall, who had just tried to reach into his pocket to steal his pitiful amount of loose change. Then he said with a smile, "I need you to cooperate with me. Do you understand?" The hooligan nodded frantically. Yes, yes, yes. Sir, I'm willing to do anything. Even if it's that kind of smack. Su Ling raised his hand and slapped him on the back of the head. What the hell are you thinking? The hooligan clutched his head and quickly apologized. Sorry. I really, truly will do anything. Su Ling nodded in satisfaction, easing his grip slightly. Very good. Now, I want you to do something very simple. He picked up the silver box and shook it in front of the hooligan. See this. Now, immediately, right now, steal it from me. Hooligan. Steal his own item. What kind of ridiculous instruction was this? He was on the verge of tears, but his instincts screamed wildly in his mind. Disobedience means death. And the kind of death that makes the news tonight. But seeing Su Ling's murderous gaze, he extended his trembling hands like a man walking to the execution ground and snatched the silver box from Su Ling's grasp. The motion instantly revealed him to be a seasoned habitual offender. Sir, is this enough? This time, Su Ling didn't answer immediately. He simply narrowed his eyes, staring at the top of the white hooligan's head. The next second, a virtual box appeared. Target does not meet requirements. Su Ling frowned slightly. Could it be that my hypothesis was wrong? Was the sin insufficient? Or was the system's judging logic not so simple? It might also be that this kid was genuinely too weak, so weak that he wasn't even associated with sin. The hooligan in front of him was still clutching the box and trembling, looking like he was ready to drop to his knees and beg for mercy at any moment. But Su Ling had no intention of giving up. Give me the box. The hooligan immediately presented the silver box with both hands. Su Ling took it and said flatly, "Snatch it back." The hooligan shivered, not daring to say another word, and instantly snatched the box back with a swoosh. Snatch. Give. Within a minute, the two of them were performing a street show, one handing it over, the other snatching it away. This whole ordeal nearly drove the hooligan into a daze. He had no idea what sin he had committed, only mechanically carrying out Su Ling's orders. Until the 8th time. The moment the box was snatched away again, Su Ling's eyes suddenly lit up. Because the box above the hooligan's head had finally changed. Conditions met. The four large, shining characters were, for Su Ling, no less than a prompt confirming a successful level completion. So that's how it works. Su Ling's mouth curved into an arc. Bugs are meant to be exploited. After this experiment, Su Ling understood. Sin is not static, it can accumulate dynamically. Even petty thugs can trigger the system's judgment, as long as they repeatedly commit criminal acts. This means, he can artificially create villains, recognized by the system. Su Ling's eyes became exceptionally bright at this moment. This was a terrifying discovery. It was also an extremely valuable discovery. Meanwhile, the thug was trembling all over while clutching the box. Completely unaware that he had just been system upgraded. Sir, should we keep going? Su Ling narrowed his eyes, looking at the trembling thug holding the box in front of him. His tone was still gentle, but it sent chills down one's spine. Tell me, what is the worst thing you have ever done? The thug froze, clearly not grasping the meaning behind Su Ling's question. A reminder. You know what happens if you lie to me. He shuddered, his mind racing, trying to find an answer that was bad enough, but wouldn't result in immediate retaliation. But under Su Ling's gaze, all thoughts of luck and cleverness were forced back. I broke into someone's house before. I killed a person. But I didn't mean to. I really didn't. I just wanted to steal some money. But the owner saw me, and I panicked. I truly didn't mean it. Su Ling's gaze gradually turned cold. It wasn't the coldness of apathy, but the absolute, ruthless coldness of a hunter locking onto its prey. Killed someone. And he thinks he can move on with a simple, I didn't mean to. The thug realized this too and couldn't help but take 2 steps back, but his back was already against the wall, leaving him no escape. Wait. Sir, listen to me. Click. A slight sound rang out. The thug's eyes widened, his lips slightly parted, unable to utter another word. His body slid weakly down the wall, finally collapsing onto the floor, motionless. At the same time, a mechanical voice immediately followed. Conditions met. Mission objective. Kill 30 heinous villains, 3/30. Su Ling tossed the thug's corpse into the corner and then said with a smile. The moment you planned to steal my money, you lost the right to live. Over the next 3 days, Su Ling did not immediately take on new commissions. With his accommodation sorted, he had more time. Weasel was typically someone who complained but acted kindly, although he emphasized every time he called that Su Ling owed him $20,000, he would occasionally send someone with a small bag containing $100, plus 2 cans of food and a bag of instant coffee. A very typical Weasel style. With this starting capital, Su Ling no longer had to worry about food and could spend more time on more important matters, such as scouting, observing, and pinpointing the exact location of target individuals. Of course, these targets were all people he was tracking himself to grind the mission. After all, he still had a long way to go before hitting the major milestone of 30. During the day, he walked through the neighborhood carrying a bag like an ordinary resident, but Su Ling observed every corner and alleyway at least twice. To be rigorous, he even used a small notebook for classification. Although he hadn't been out of the research institute for long, Su Ling had completely adapted to the rules of this world. Sometimes, if he couldn't find a suitable target, he still had ways. After all, he was a transmigrator who knew how to exploit bugs. Creating a scenario, luring the target into making a mistake, manually increasing their sin value, making them achieve system-recognized evil, and finally killing them himself. Su Ling was becoming increasingly proficient with this set of tactics. Thus, 3 days later, the mission progress jumped directly from 3/30 to 15/30. A full 12 heinous villains were all sent off to reincarnation. This was the kind of efficiency that would make the King of Hell shake his head. Of course, these people were not random passers-by Su Ling found. Every single one was a genuine piece of trash. Drug dealers, gambling intermediaries, illegal arms traffickers, and even 2 nocturnal beasts who tried to assault young girls. It can be said that he had not killed a single innocent person. Su Ling could certainly have gone faster. With his current abilities and bug-exploiting methods, completing all 30 in a single day was not impossible. But Su Ling was cautious. Large-scale serial deaths could easily attract the attention of the police, gangs, or even more terrifying organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D. At this very moment, inside the mercenary bar, the mercenaries were drinking and bragging as usual, but there was only one recent, hot topic. West Manhattan had suddenly become peaceful. Have you heard? That area has been very peaceful lately. Is this situation good for us? Several of my employers canceled their contracts. They said the target suddenly vanished and they didn't need my help anymore. What the hell happened? Your news is outdated. Someone is cleaning up those pests. Cleaning up. What does that mean? Which idiot is doing charity work? It's not charity, it's a hero. I heard he carries a silver box, and takes down bad guys on sight, without asking for money or leaving a name. Huh. Someone likes working for free. There's such a good thing. Why doesn't he come wash the dishes at my house? Who knows? Maybe, he's just a genuinely good person. The men laughed while continuing their nonsense chatter. But what they didn't know was that these conversations were clearly heard by Weasel, who was behind the bar. Weasel's expression gradually shifted from shock and numbness to complexity. He finally couldn't help but shift his gaze toward the center of the conversation, who was currently looking down and drinking water in front of him, and then spoke. I always thought that Guy Wade was the most perverse person I knew. I didn't expect you to be even more perverse than him. Box Hero, why does that sound so silly? You might as well call yourself Captain Box. Su Ling chuckled and retorted. Be careful, I might sue you for slander. I've been sleeping soundly at home these past few days. Weasel couldn't help but roll his eyes. Do you think I'm blind? Saying this, he pointed towards the red box at Su Ling's feet. Isn't this obvious enough? Don't talk nonsense. This is clearly red. Saying this, Su Ling even patted the side of the box earnestly. The Box Hero they mentioned uses a silver box. They are completely different, understand? Weasel stared at Su Ling's earnest face, with only one thought in his mind: how is this guy's skin thicker than Wade's? But he was too lazy to argue with such logic. He pulled a thick folder from under the bar and slapped it down in front of Su Ling. Alright, stop pretending. This is your new identity. Inside are all the forged details, including a driver's license, medical records, even records of your childhood vaccinations. As long as you don't provoke those lunatics, no one will find any problems. The lunatics Weasel referred to were high-level departments like the FBI. These people could clean out a person's entire history with the flick of a finger. Su Ling certainly wouldn't be stupid enough to walk out and yell, I have a fake identity. He nodded, put the folder away, and said, thanks. I almost forgot, there's one more thing I need your help with. Weasel was just picking up a bottle to wet his throat, and upon hearing Su Ling's words, he nearly lost his balance. He could even faintly smell danger in the air. Thanks for watching.